Chapter 26. The First Lost Revelation. The new year came, much to a great bummer. As the holiday season ended, it was time to return back to school. Upon returning back to school, Milo became more attracted to Amira since finding out her birthday. Immediately after Christmas, Milo developed this fantasy of suggesting a carol concert on Easter morning at St. Timothy's before Mass began. Milo started researching festive Easter hymns and tweaked many unfamiliar Christmas carols to a more Easter theme. Milo hoped that Katie and her dad would assist him, as he knew they had connections to the St. Timothy's music ministry. Unfortunately, Milo had no clue how to propose this. The week after returning from break had been a bit of a rough one, as another student had died in a car accident one Sunday night. The news reached the students on Monday afternoon. During middle class, Aunt Judy sounded grim over the announcements, asking that an email be read. The teachers announced that a student had gotten severely injured in a car accident and was in quite bad condition. Milo did not know this boy, but knew that his grandparents had gone to St. Timothy's. That afternoon, in English, the principal announced that the student had passed. Then the principal gave a series of instructions and counseling services, and were asked not to visit the residence of the parents whose son died. The day this boy died, Milo had art club, as the teacher had a previous engagement on Tuesday and Thursday, when both art club normally occurred. Milo had been in art club since his freshman year. The next day in school, there was quite a lot of talk about the student who passed away. The principal announced that the teachers had a meeting to remember the boy who died. In Spanish class, Bailey mentioned having taken this pretty hard, as she was a cheerleader who cheered him in basketball. Final preparations. Melendel called one final meeting in releasing the long-withheld revelation. The others in attendance were Kashmir, Alexander, Husisha, and Irvina, the cosmologist of the fifth Anagrammatron order. Kashmir started to understand why Husisha brought the Jafaris into the picture and why the chorus had to move. Melendel explained how Baruch, Apollonius, Hidari, and Bacchus from the Satyasha order were being counseled by Maranatha and himself, and had done a great team effort in kick-starting the revelations. Melendel summoned Kashmir to call for some schedule adjustments, while Alexander had been summoned to kickstart the Easter spirit. Huzisha then tells the jinns at the meeting the vision he had that he was not to disclose until the time came. The vision was given to Huzisha before bringing the Jafaris into the picture. Huzisha did not even understand it at the time. Huzisha tells the first vision of a horse rancher whose black stallion has run away, and his neighbor calls this a great misfortune, which the farmer replies, "We'll see." Then the horse returns home in the morning with 3 other horses. The neighbor calls this a great fortune. The rancher still replies, "We'll see." When the rancher's son rode the horse and fell off, breaking his leg, the neighbor called this a great tragedy, and the rancher responded, "We'll see." The next day, the magistrate came to draft the farmer's son to war, but declined to the offer due to his injury. The second vision of Huzisha starts off with a planter planting a tree that grows into a sapling. One day the planter forgets where he planted the sapling, and he runs into a forest elder who tells him that it would be a better investment to nurse this new sapling just planted. Over the years, the planter cares for the tree, but is not successful. The tree is unhealthy and weak. One day, a great wind blows this tree away, roots and all. The planter tracks down the elder and confronts him about having been scammed. The elder then brings the planter over to the remaining tree and explains that this was the tree originally planted. At this, the planter gives thanks to the elder for his great wisdom. The third vision of Huzisha involves a sailor trying to get home, but does not know the way. A seductress explains that only the cartographer knows the way home, but has died and now resides in the realm of Hades. This sailor knows that going into the underworld is a horrifying and potentially dangerous endeavor, but goes on the task anyways. The ship's mates protest and willing to dock at some closer place and start over again. The sailor sails into the cave that leads down the river unto the gloomy underworld. The shipmates stay back at another rocky island. On the sailor's travels, he comes across the dead cartographer, who gives him instructions back home. The sailor continues his sailing and is heckled by the dead, who try to destroy his ship and keep him from leaving. The sailor goes into the supply cabinet, lights a fire, and finds a way out to the caves of the netherworld, and teaches the residents of the netherworld the art of firemaking. Meanwhile, those who stayed back on the rocky island had become distraught and unhappy with the new residency, and could not find anyone on land or sea who could lead the way home. Then at once the sailor sailed back to the shipmates who stayed back, and they bowed in homage to the one worthy to lead the ship back home. At this declaration, the Jinns understood Hugh plans initiated so many years ago. The loosening of the seals. 2 days later, Milo had art club on a Wednesday. After art club, Milo found that Amira was also at school after some program, waiting on the school boardwalk. Milo was about to go and talk to Amira, but could not, as Margaret had already arrived in order to pick Milo up. Then Milo spotted a woman who looked like she could be Amira's mother waiting in the parking lot. As Margaret had arrived, in the sky there was a vision of a cloud in which Jesus is sitting upon the throne with 2 sealed scrolls. In the middle of the noble is with the noble lion at his left and the sacrificial lamb on the right. On the cloud there was also an incense burner with sweet aromas coming forward. There were many cherubim singing power, strength, and riches, while the seraphim on the right were singing wisdom, honor, glory, and blessing and strength. Then there was a set of 7 golden eyes that was sent to the side upon grounds, guarded at several locations and different stations. Then a glowing dove flew past Amira, where the snow declared the great Amen. At home that night, Grandpa Tony came over for dinner and asked Milo if he knew the student who had passed away. Milo explained that he did not. After dinner, Milo came across the hymn, "This is the Feast of Victory for our God," while also listening to a Bible version of Revelation 5 after doing some research on the hymn. Milo had not heard the hymn in church since he was in 5th grade over the Eastertide, which was Tom's last Mass, and had not even thought about the hymn much since 7th grade. The last time the hymn was even popular at St. Timothy's was back when Milo was in 4th grade and was the ending hymn for Easter, his first spring break in 1999. On Thursday, Milo had been in a bit of a bad mood, as Minu had not been on the bus, and he had been out of music to listen to as the holiday season was over. Otherwise, the blues were still in the school over the boy who died. Plus that afternoon all the snow melted. Soon enough, Milo did find some CDs he got for Christmas full of classical music, and on Friday, Minu was back on the bus. While sitting on the bus, during one of the songs Milo was listening to, he saw Amira also boarding her bus. That Friday night, after piano lessons, Uncle Giorgio and Rob invited Milo to a basketball game. Before the game, Ray and Milo got dinner at Arby's. For Milo, this was a strange occurrence, as Uncle Giorgio never invited him to a basketball game before, just without Ray. Milo suspected that Uncle Giorgio had done this thinking that Milo had a rough week at school with the student's death. That evening, after the game, Milo was truly at peace, as this basketball game is exactly what he needed to keep his mind off of everything. As it was, Milo fell asleep quickly and quite peacefully that night. The site of the temple. The Elfes had instructed the kobolds to make haste to the West Valley, assuring them they would understand when they arrived. The kobolds had taken a long, lonesome journey, wishing they could stay with the Elfes. One morning, the Elfes had disappeared, and the kobolds were thoroughly distraught. The journey had become quite wearisome, and the kobolds had no clue what path to go on. One night, the kobolds found a stone monument saying West Valley. Upon arrival, the kobolds set up camp and fell asleep. That morning, when they woke up, now they had heard that night some singing and from in the distance of some song telling of a vigil of the upcoming days of festivity. The next morning, the kobolds awoke at sunrise and saw a glorious sight. The kobolds got a view of the temple from afar, nearly identical to the view they had so long ago from the mountains on the day of their victory over the offspring trolls. The view the kobolds had of the temple complex recently was the side from the gardens. This new view that the kobolds had of the temple had long been forgotten, and they had just understood that the two views from the mountains and the garden were the same temple. That afternoon, the kobolds came across a circular plaza used for festivals, made of stone to form a Gothic Triskele. This was quite a large plaza. By mid-afternoon, a group of elves gathered and began 3 circular dances on the 3 Triskeles. In the middle, there was a fife player, and in the middle of each dance, and a fiddle player in the areas outside the circles. That evening, the kobolds joined in the festivities in honor of the Phoenix. The Phoenix appeared to the elves before the kobolds arrived and instructed them to celebrate this feast. After the feast, one elf gifted the kobold with a box that the great Phoenix had left for them. In the box, the kobolds found some plans that they had drawn up after the earthquake that the great Phoenix had judged most worthy of expansions to their headquarters. These festivities had been quite joyful, and developed a new appreciation for the nearly forgotten victory over the troll offspring so long ago. Dancing Day. The night after the basketball game, Milo had a dream about looking through a yearbook full of depressed freshmen who missed middle school. Then the dream turned into a memory of Donald kept long forgotten over Holy Week, and the brown-haired girl, along with her brother, who tried to crush his hopes of seeing Patrick. In this dream, the boy is said the same thing about Patrick not coming back. Milo kept insisting that Patrick would return, and he did show up, as Milo had trusted. When Milo wakes up, he then has some understanding that brown-haired little girl really was Amira. Milo had started to remember the girl as having Amira's skin tone and hair color. Then Milo started to think about how strange it was that only 60 years ago he saw his counselor Patrick as a mentor, when he probably was not that much older than he was when he was working at the job, as Milo is now. Then Milo started to realize that he really did like Amira, and began having flashbacks to this long-neglected Holy Week. Milo was utterly stunned that his roots with Amira went back even further than they had with the Jafaris. Milo always assumed the first time he had seen Amira was at the funeral home over 3 years ago. Milo was also in wonder about how he looked up, at 10 years old, looked up to mentors like Patrick. That day, Lydia had a basketball game at a church past Sutter Pond. The referee was a real nasty jerk, being real mean to a girl with earrings. After the game, the Biancatellis went to lunch at Sichuan Garden Chinese restaurant. Unfortunately, Milo got a slight burn on his tongue from the wonton soup lunch special. As to what Milo ordered, he did not even remember. That night, for the first time, that afternoon, when getting back, Milo used the program BearShare for the first time to download some new church music. The first song Milo had downloaded was known as Tomorrow Shall Be My Dancing Day, which is a medieval English carol retelling of Jesus' life in the form of a dance. Then there was a vision of Jesus dancing with a set of angels dressed in English folk costumes, playing a lute, fiddle, and pipes. Then little Milo and Amira and her phony brother joined in the circular dance, while the angels cryptically sang over and over again, "This have I done for my true love." In the afternoon, Milo worked on an eagle wood carving kit he got for Christmas, and was still pondering what he had found out. Milo knew with the Jafaris that his first memories were from seeing the video after 5th grade with Pavoni's first communion. But with this one, Milo's first memories of Amira seemed to be when they were in, 4th grade a year before Pavani. That night, the songs Milo downloaded were known as Il Est Né, which is a French original for He is Born, the Holy Child, and 2 Marty Haugen hymns, Gather Us In and Canticle of the Sun. Milo then worked on sheet music for the song This Is the Feast of Victory, which she planned on proposing to the St. Timothy's Choir for the Easter morning. Then Milo had these flashbacks, stepping back as far as the end of 1st grade, when he was first freed from Magruder, his first communion in 2nd grade, Holy Week at Dettlekip, the summer of aversion towards the sports hall, Liliana at the camp, the original flashback on the 7th grade field trip, the horrors moving, and the fallout with the Jafari. At once, these events started to make sense for Milo in a way that words just could never describe. The Temple Complex meeting. There was a great gathering of the Jinns at the Temple Complex, housing the Demusidian Temple, Inanian Temple, and the Rose Garden. There were many Jinn present, including the Silphunums, Melendel and Meronota, and the Magnuses, Alexander, Kashmir, the retirees, Alfie, Udo, Max, and Oliver. The seers in attendance were Azias, Huzisha, Yoriana, Donil, and Daxividus. The Sarcedics in attendance were Gregory, Papalbus, and Polyphanes. The Satyashas in attendance were Ahamkara, Skeeter, Volturian, Baruch, Apollonius, Hidari, and Bacchus. The Anagramtrons in attendance were Vesta, Andreas, Bilius, Kabira, Meriwether, Victor, and Randolph. The charisms of St. Matthew and Isaiah also showed up too. Before the first order of the ceremony, Melendel called up Baruch, Apollonius, Hidari, and Bacchus and commemorated them for working together, and gave them a plaque with a depiction of a CD and a music book etched in. Then Melendel called up Volturian and Skeeter to commemorate them for overcoming their differences, and gave them a plaque with an iceberg sketched on. Then the seers gave several moving speeches. Daxividus announced that the time of restoration had been completed. Daxividus spoke of the dark works, the Grail alien's offspring had been fulfilled, and the charism of St. Matthew took a pile of chaff he referred to as Duscidium and tossed it in the fire, while placing an offer of wheat on the Inanian temple altar. Huzisha announced that the fulfillment of this strange and often taxing strike was at hand. Even Uriama had some good to speak of, and announced the ending of Draco's penalty is soon to begin. Most moving of all was Isaiah's declaration that the new dawn had begun and the darkness had vanished. Isaiah declared that all the desires and fears had been met on this day. Then Aeneas announced that the days of inclusion for the outcast have now begun. Durnil then gave a speech calling for the longing Senexes and unfashionable purebodies to always keep united and play their role to be a light for the world in the days of fall and restoration to the mighty. Then Durnil called for Polyphanes and Papalbus to fulfill the roles well and let their examples show. Margaret declares that the spell long broken have now borne its full fruits. That which was once desecrated has been made holy by the hands of Solomon Uranus, according to Margaret. Margaret then declares that the works of Polyphanes and Papalbus revealed a bountiful transformation from the oppressor's hands to the hands of Brother Volition. The Elements then made a surprise visit. During the ceremony, the first element to arrive were Mother Earth and Father Time. At once, all the jinns bowed before the two. Mother Earth offered a map made of cotton to the altar and said, "This is the place," while Father Time offered many film reels and declared, "This is the day." Then Brother Volition and Sister Wisdom showed up, and the jinns bowed for a second time. Brother Volition offered a wheat cake, while Sister Wisdom offered a skin full of finest wine. The rest of the weekend. That Saturday night, Milo dreamt again, but this time about when 101 Dalmatians was re-released when he was 2, and a puzzle he used to have in his bedroom of the 101 Dalmatians movie poster. Milo did not understand what the significance of this dream was at the time. Yet Milo could not help but remember something about this strange dream having something to do with what had just been revealed the night before. That Sunday morning, Milo was the altar server. Before Mass, Father Nick mentioned to a sacristan that he would be meeting with the deceased boy's family. At Mass, they mentioned the deceased boy from the car accident in the petitions for all those who had passed on. This boy had gone to St. Timothy's for elementary school, and his grandparents were at this Mass that morning and looked quite distraught. That afternoon, Milo watched his first communion video. After seeing the video, Milo and Ray went bowling. That Monday, which was Martin Luther King Day, Milo had an orthodontist appointment. In the morning, Milo worked on some more Easter music, which he was considering proposing to Katie's dad, Nick, and Jorge. By the mid-afternoon, Margaret arrived home to take Milo to the orthodontist. At the office, Margaret saw an old friend of the family, Anne. Milo had started thinking about what it would have been like if Kazim had been there As Milo knew well, Mira used to have braces, like when she was visiting the Corras long ago. Plus, Milo remembered well how Margaret had met Kazim the year before as an accountant firm. During the appointment, Milo had a song, Canticle of the Sun, stuck in his head, which he also downloaded. Then there was a great vision from Saint Francis of Assisi, the great revolutionary and staunch traditionalist. There was a great scene of all creation. Man and beast sing their praises to the Creator. Man had been frolicking through nature in the forest and field, singing their praises. They praised the sun for giving light to this new day, and thanked the stars who led them through the now ended night. Then they praised the mighty winds that blew the sheets of music, a CD and a hymn book exactly where it needed to go. Then they praised the mighty rain from the previous summer that yielded a fruitful harvest, bringing forth new life. Then they praised the fire that had given them warmth through the long dark night of the past, and preserved a spirit of joy through the times of trial. Then they praised Mother Earth for bringing forth the noble flowers and trees which produced much bounty for their enjoyment. Then they praised Sister Death for teaching truth and value at the move and falling out, and that this and the means to restoration. All this creation sang the song of glory to God forevermore. Amen. The headquarters edition. After the festival, the kobolds traveled back to their headquarters. On their way to the headquarters, the kobolds had looked at the mountains and longed to find and make pilgrimage to the mountains that they had long gotten their view from the temple from. The kobolds continued their travels, still singing the songs from the festival and reveling at this great glory. When the kobolds had returned to Londinium, they began to analyze the headquarters. They had looked over their plans and did some work in Londinium to acquire the products needed to begin this project. The first project required was to build a cultural center representing Spot Tustica. During this time, the kobolds spent a significant amount of time in the cliffs of Spot Tustica in order to gather needed items and to gain a better understanding of the different customs of this land. Despite the Forester kobolds having originated from Spot Tustica, they had a very limited understanding of the culture, as they were taken away so long ago, and the only regions they knew of were the Gardens of Pedmontis. During this time, the kobolds got a greater appreciation for their customs and culture. Spending this much time in Londinium had reminded the kobolds of the days when they were adjusting to the fall of their bridge between the Gardens of Pedmontis and Leonellum. This also reminded the kobolds of the days when they first received the news that they were invited to Atlantica. What had especially reminded the kobolds of the time was how they spent so much time planning these ambitious additions. The winter. During this time, Milo started having flashbacks to being in 8th grade and the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, thanks in part to seeing the Full House episode The Last Dance from the previous chapter. Milo also became more interested in his Italian heritage. One weekend after Milo had such revelations, he started playing the game Luigi's Mansion, which he got from Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane for Christmas. So far, Milo liked the game a lot more than he expected he would. One segment of the game reminded Milo of this plaza on the side of Malt campus. On one weekend, Milo was a bit bummed out about missing the semi-formal, and sort of wish he had known earlier in order to ask Mira. By that evening, Milo was in a much better mood, as he got to go to Olive Garden for dinner, as this was also Ray's birthday. Mind you, Olive Garden is the most inauthentic Italian food out there. On Saturday night, Salvatore came over to Milo's house, as Ray and Margaret had a work party. On that night, Milo and Salvatore watched some Simpsons episodes from the same VHS that Rory gave him years back. And then Milo and Salvatore watched his first communion video. During this Simpsons episode, Milo noticed from the Simpsons episode that Ned Flanders looked like one of the priests from his communion video. Milo had found this quite ironic. After watching some TV, Milo and Salvatore downloaded some traditional Italian music off of their share. This had been another thing Milo was quite interested in, such as downloading traditional songs like the Tarantula. At this time, Milo began gym class and made friends with an Italian girl also named Liliana, and befriended another old nemesis, Kathleen, from 2nd grade. It was one of those stupid nemesis that a lot of times little kids get in for such stupid reasons. Otherwise, Milo was not a big fan of gym class, as the students would put on pretty rough runs, and he would be too tired at lunchtime. That weekend, Milo and Ray went to the Palestrinas Market, which is a local Italian store that sells their own sauce, pizza, shells, and desserts. The last time, as we know, Milo was there in 8th grade the day before a party at Uncle Giorgio's and the day before Easter. That night, Ray made some Italian-style sandwiches while watching this incredibly stupid Tyler Perry movie. Lydia's friend Emily was over that night. Emily is a third cousin, as we know, to Milo and Lydia, and her sister Morgan is in art club with Milo, and as Milo knew from one day, she had befriended Amira, sort of. According to Morgan, Amira seemed like a nice girl. Returned through the mountains. During this time, the kobolds took a trip back to Lionellum, as they needed supplies from the Atlantis region. On the way back through the mountains, the kobolds kept an eye out for the area in the mountains that they had seen the temple at from so long ago. The kobolds could not find the mountains through the path and did not have time for a leisurely trip of exploration. On the rest of the trip, the kobolds saw a mountain that looked familiar and suspected that this was the mountain that they had seen the temple from so long ago. They had been in awe of seeing such a great mountain and dared not climb up it until doing some more research. Ash Wednesday Eve. On the day before Ash Wednesday, Milo was sitting at his lunch table with his friends, Sean, Jeff, and 5 new girls. Karen was Jeff's temporary girlfriend and brought her friends Courtney, Lexi, April, and Laura to her lunch table. Except for Karen and Jeff and Milo and Sean. These girls were all freshmen. Karen was actually in Milo's Spanish class that year and was in his science class the year before. On Ash Wednesday Eve, Milo's table was not too far from Amira's table. Milo noticed Amira was selling some candy. Sean and Jeff had joked about stealing the candy, to which Milo said that he couldn't, as he had feelings for the girl with the candy. April told Milo who Amira was and that she went to middle school with her. Of course, Milo knew exactly who Amira was. Milo told April that he had known Amira before at the Corrers' house. Milo explains how the Corrers were also Iranian and used to see the girls playing in his backyard before the Corrers moved. In the cafeteria, there was a vision of the present full of Mardi Gras partying and a plate of Fat Tuesday cupcakes with a saxophone player and Shrove Tuesday bulbs. Then the vision turned into this purple future of Lent, being kicked off with an Ash Wednesday service of distributing ashes, declaring, "Thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return." Church banners depicting a cross, hammers and nails, and crowns of thorns, and old palms being burned were displayed. That night, Milo found the community mass Lamb of God from the himprint.net website and became quite haunted by the melody. Milo's cousin thought the hymn, Samantha thought the song sounded like someone had died, like a funeral song. Milo had known about the community mass since finding it in his funeral book, and he remembered the Sanctus from 6 years ago at St. Timothy's. Before going to bed, Milo sent his old friend Steve an anonymous instant messenger note telling him to remember tomorrow is a day of fasting. Remember the fine line between ordinary time and Lent, all the while listening to a MIDI file of the hymn known as Hear Us Almighty Lord. This is an old Latin chant of penitence sung throughout Lent, in Latin known as a Tende Domine, which was quite popular at St. Timothy's at the time. That Ash Wednesday came about, and Milo and Ray went to church that night. In church, there was a vision of this forbidden tree that no one was to eat of, or all hell would break loose. Then the world dissolves into ashes. Then a mysterious figure known as the suffering servant came forth to take the burden. Then the vision turned into the history of the nation of Israel, Jesus as his passion, and the sufferings of all of humanity. That Friday, Margaret took Milo, Lydia, Eustace, and Samantha to see the movie Are We There Yet?, which proved to be utterly stupid. Ray took Sylvester to the mall arcade, as he was still too little to sit through a movie like that. Probably got the better end of the deal. After the movie, they all met at Long John Silver's for dinner, thanks to being a Lenten Friday. That night, they were back at the Biancatellos, and Milo showed Sylvester some of his church music. Now, Sylvester did not particularly like the music. Melendel and the Seers. Melendel had seen the sight in the church and the cafeteria. Alexander believed that this was just a herald to remind the Christian community that the beginning of Lent was near. Melendel knew that this was in connection to the burden that he still carries, but unable to reveal, as he does not know yet, or even let Alexander and Kashmir know that he has one. Melendel headed off with Alexander and Kashmir to the Hall of Prophecies to check with the seers. Melendel found Uriama, Pandora, Husisha, and the Sosidics Gregory with his soldier Dedon, who had kept an eye out for Lucille. Melendel had seen that they all looked quite grim, and had not felt so easy about seeing Uriama or Dedon. Dedon gave the first piece of bad news, as he knew Lucille was getting a bit close with Amira. As we remember, Lucille was the girl Milo got into a conflict with back in 5th grade over ignoring her requests. Uriama had seen the vision and explained that the leader of the Meludicos, known as the Accuser, has something against Milo. Melendel knew that Milo had a falling out with the Jafaris, and now found out that Lucille was getting quite close with Amira. Then Dedon explained other matters he saw, and how Henry, whom Milo had some clashes, was was dating Amira's friend Allison. Melendo then understood why the Coda Promos departed from the lunch table when the horsemen appeared making vile offers. Alexander protested this, knowing full well that Milo never did anything to Amira, gave Minyu her space, and had a right to talk about horror movies, and confessed any way he wronged Henry. Yuriyama explained that neither the Meludicos nor the accuser have any sense of pardon or mercy, and that Draco only cares about retribution. Pandora explains that Milo never particularly cared for Lucille and had harbored some offensive thoughts about the Jafaris that Amira would not take too well to. Then Pandora explains that the vision of the tree is more imminent and to watch over Milo. Yuzisha then speaks of the man in the name of the dance who is greater than all the Meludicos and the accuser combined. Yuzisha then confidently declares that he will be needed for a little while longer. Alicia's birthday weekend. 2 Fridays later, in school, Milo noticed that Minyu was not on the bus and had been interested to know where she was. When Milo arrived at school, he spotted Nusha at the school shadowing another student. At first, Milo thought this was Anahita. Nusha was an 8th grader at St. Timothy's at the time. Like her sisters, Nusha was planning on attending Cedar Pond High. This explained a lot to Milo, such as Minyu's absence. In gym class, Liliana had been the leader for stretches and counted in Italian. During gym class, seeing Nusha started reminding Milo of early 8th grade, particularly the beginning, before there was any falling out. That day in study hall, Milo and his new friend Zach started playing with his paint program. They tried to make a ghost speak with a write out loud program. The feature made the ghost sound more like he had a smoker's cough. Milo had expected Nusha to be eating lunch at the same time, as this had been the case when both Amira and Minyu had been in Milo's school over the past 2 years. After school had ended, Milo saw Mrs. Jafari picking up Minyu, Nusha, and Roxana. As it was, Nusha could not ride the bus yet, as she was only shadowing. This further got Milo thinking about his first semester of 8th grade, as he remembered those days when he had been at peace with the Jafaris. Milo's first semester of 8th grade was when the Courage moved, but these memories of the move no longer seemed unpleasant to Milo anymore. The next day, Milo downloaded some Simpsons Halloween of Horror, and particularly Halloween of Horror Part 1. This was the first Halloween of Horror, which premiered in the 2nd season. This had been the episode Milo saw 3 Halloweens ago when doing a 3-way calling with Steve and Shane. The Treehouse of Horror 1 reminded Milo of the Bray Bradbury movie known as The Veldt, as the music was similar. What was really going on was Milo had become interested in The Simpsons again. Milo had seen The Veldt before Thanksgiving break in 8th grade, which was why he wanted to see that episode again of The Simpsons. That night, Milo had another family party at Uncle Giorgio and Aunt Judy's in celebration of Alicia's birthday. As for the party, this went pretty well. In the beginning, Sylvester broke Uncle Giorgio's light switch accidentally and tried to blame Milo. Otherwise, the party had gone as planned. This party reminded Milo of 2 years ago when Uncle Giorgio hosted many get-togethers after Grandma Rosa passed away. Matt was a little bummed out, as they would have to leave the next day, considering Alicia wanted to get back to New Seneca to see her friends for her birthday. That night, Lily and Samantha spent the night at the Biancotellos. That when they were over, Samantha gave Milo a hard time for listening to the hymn Ye Watchers and Ye Holy Ones as one of the songs he downloaded, as the song had Alleluias, which are not supposed to be sung during Lent. This is only about singing them in church, not about outside of church. The next morning, the whole family, including Aunt Adrienne, went to Mass, as the Mass was for Grandma Rosa. The responsorial song used was Psalm 33, Let Your Mercy Be on Us, by Marty Haugen. After Mass, there was a pancake breakfast run by the confirmation class as community service. When Milo got down to the cafeteria, he noticed Minu serving food. Milo sat with Salvatore, Aunt Diane, Grandpa Tony, Uncle Giorgio, and Aunt Judy. When Margaret, Ray, Aunt Michelle, Uncle Ottavio, Uncle Leo, Aunt Jane, Eustace, Samantha, and Sylvester got seated, and the Salvatore's neighbor Katie showed up. Sylvester gave Katie a big hug and told her about getting a container of fruit in the cutest way possible. Minu had avoided Milo's table, which was probably a good thing, as Milo would have thought about ordering kebabs and rice. Minu did take care of the table the other relatives were sitting at, which included his parents. Now, Margaret and Ray got quite a laugh about that. At the other table, Aunt Michelle introduced the family to Katie. Milo did not feel overly excited about these encounters, and was a bit disturbed about this. That night, Milo saw The Parent Trap, which gave him flashbacks to 4th grade and reminded him of Liliana from summer camp, and that evening at Aunt Michelle's before dinner kip. Milo started understanding why he had these flashbacks of that years of summer camp. One weekend later, Milo went with Steve and Merle back to the car show in Toledo. Milo got the call late one Friday evening. Steve apologized about letting Milo know so late. Milo agreed to this as he had nothing planned. In the next morning, Milo was taking over to Neil's house. Neil got mad at Steve over a toy he got that swears at people. Soon enough, Merle arrived and they were off to Toledo. On the way up, they watched a Cody Banks movie with an Indian girl on it who was quite weird. And they also watched European Summer Vacation, which Milo was a bit overwhelmed with, considering some of the scenes they had shown not being quite stuff he was familiar with or comfortable with, especially with other people around. Despite this being a car show, that year was better, as Steve did not run off. During the show, the guys went over to an arcade where the Ferris wheel stands. This year they all got to ride the Ferris wheel, and the arcade reminded Milo of taking a trip to New Seneca. This got Milo a bit excited about that upcoming trip. For dinner, they stopped at Steak and Shake. This was the first time Milo had been to the restaurant, which had not arrived in Cedar Pond yet. Milo had made a call at the restaurant back at home, telling Ray that their car broke down near a hotel and that he needed to come and pick them up. Ray did not buy this and asked Milo how his trip was going. Milo got quite a laugh at this. No, Merle did. Merle got a laugh at this. That Sunday, Milo had a penance service and admitted to Father Nick that he still struggles with grudges towards the O'Malleys for making him feel squeezed in. Milo also mentioned that he had seen some naughty movies on the way up to the show. Father Nick explained that if he saw it, it wasn't like really his fault, and like they're not gonna bust him on thought crimes, and they're not gonna condemn people on unexpected thought crimes as such. As for the rest of this Lent season, life had been fairly smooth. After a fairly bland week of school, Milo had gone to one of Lydia's basketball games and felt that the season of Lent had gotten pretty bland. Otherwise, Milo was also getting bored of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes and wanted to see the regular episodes. Frankly, Milo felt these Treehouse of Horror episodes lacking substance. On one occasion, Katie and her family sat next to Milo's family in church one Sunday morning, which would have been a Sunday that the Fathers were not in church. The Kobolds' Pilgrimage. Back in Lionellum, the Kobolds looked over the maps of their region that included Sportistica, Atlantica, Galacadium, and the mountains. The kobolds knew where on the map that the view of the temple was from, but had some difficulty getting an exact location of the mountain and a way to get to this mountain. Luckily, a local cartographer who knew how to read the map with precision confirmed that they had the correct mountain and showed them the best pathway to get there. The kobold's plan was to travel the mountain while returning to Londinium for a dedication ceremony for the completed Spartustica Cultural Center. Before departing, the kobolds returned to the location where they had first seen the view of the temple. While visiting, the keeper of the temple walked by and raised his hand in gesture of blessing to the kobolds. One afternoon, the kobolds began the journey up the mountains with much anticipation. It only took the kobolds one day to find the mountain, and they immediately recognized it from the battle so many years ago. The hike up the mountain only took 2 days. Once the kobolds reached the summit, they saw the temple in its glory like they had seen it the first time during the battle back in Lionellum. And in Lionellum, they had taken a good look at the temple and saw it into the complex, and then so long had longed to enter into the walls and walk through their gardens. After spending too much time, the kobolds had to make a somber journey back to Londinium. The kobolds were thoroughly depressed about leaving the mountain, but were excited about being able to spend the Feast of the Flood in Pedmontis. After reaching the headquarters, the kobolds saw that the Spartustica Cultural Center was completed and saw this beautiful facility with a small park. After the dedication, the kobolds received the news that Spartustica had been shut down due to a mild mudslide. As for the Feast of the Flood, preparations were being made. This year, the Feast of the Flood was held back in the shelter where the kobolds stayed during the flood. This year, the presider of the feast declared with great authority that this would be the last feast to celebrate only the flood. The presider declared that in upcoming days, the days of deliverance shall fully be realized when the wings of scarlet shall return in glory. Before spring break. The week before spring break, Milo's biology class went to an oldies concert. Milo found out that Amira was in the chorus, but did not know this before, as he had missed the Christmas concert that was at the junior high school due to his metalworking class over the holiday. The chorus sang the song Teenager in Love. Amira was dressed in a pretty nice-looking tie-dye shirt and sunglasses. Of course, Milo loved a little too much. For the rest of biology, Milo had trouble concentrating as he was so entranced by the way Amira looked at the concert. At lunch that day, Milo decided it was time, made the move, and bought a candy bar from Amira. Milo went over to Amira's table and asked to buy a Hershey's S'mores bar. Milo never really told Amira who he was. Frankly, Amira had no clue that this boy who brought candy to her loved her so much, or that he was a former neighbor of the Collins. Amira thanked Milo for his purchase. 2 days later, on St. Patrick's Day, Milo was walking home from school and Uncle Ottavio was driving by, home from work, and stopped to give Milo a lift. Uncle Ottavio took him back to the Filentinos' home. When they got to the house, Milo was invited to dinner by Aunt Michelle. At dinner, Grandpa Tony, Grandma Dora, Aunt Michelle, Uncle Ottavio, Salvatore, and Gianni were all there. For dinner, they had beef stew to celebrate the St. Patrick's Day occasion. Well, this was according to Uncle Ottavio that stews are strictly an Irish thing. Milo told Salvatore all about the candy he bought and the plans to keep the wrapper. Salvatore knew about Amira for a little while. Aunt Michelle got quite a kick out of this. Grandma Dora did not really understand what this was all about, as she still did not understand what the broken English, or that she had broken English and did not fully understand English slang too well. The grandparents, otherwise Grandpa Tony, also thought this was a bit strange. After dinner, Milo and Salvatore were looking at old yearbooks of St. Timothy's, to which he came across old pictures of Katie, Minu, and Nusha. In one of the pictures, Nusha had a boy haircut, much to his laughter. These pictures did not have a whole lot of effect on Milo. Spring break began as school let out on Friday morning. For the first time, Milo downloaded a full Simpson episode. The episodes he downloaded were Who Shot Mr. Burns, Parts 1 and 2, and Two Bad Neighbors. Milo had seen Two Bad Neighbors 3 years ago, and first saw the episode in Columbus the summer after first grade. Now, if you know, the episode Who Shot Mr. Burns was when he did all that stupid stuff and got the town all angry at him, only to get shot by Maggie accidentally, but it was a whole mission case. It's still a good episode. That night, Milo got out a Simpsons drawing book that he had not looked at since he had got it 6 years ago. This is the Simpsons book he thought was quite irritating due to only having the immediate family. Milo had taken up Simpsons doodling that Friday and drew some new pictures of teachers in the form of a Simpson style from his freshman yearbook. That night, Milo listened to a newly downloaded Lamb of God from the Massive Creation by Marty Haugen. Now, this is the one that's quite popular. Had been quite popular at St. Timothy's as far back as Milo could remember. there was a new vision, where the tree of knowledge, passion symbols and ashes were all brushed over by lamb's blood, where the tree of knowledge turned into a life-giving tree of life, and the symbols of the passion became brightly gold while the ashes disapparated. There was another symbol of the people begging, Lamb of God, have mercy on us. To Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, grant us your peace in confidence. The next day, Lydia had another basketball game, and the Biancatellos returned to Sichuan Garden for lunch. At the restaurant, Milo saw a former classmate from Salvatore and his father as the basketball coach. At lunch, Milo and Lydia had been informed that Roger and Denise invited them over for dinner that night. Roger had a week off from visiting family as his father was terminally ill, and his father did not have long. Milo remembered how 6 years ago Roger and Denise took Milo and Lydia back to their house to play with Shamus and Charlie. This had been 2 days before Doodle Cup. Milo was a little bummed out at first, thinking that he only had a week to propose any musical ideas to Katie and Nick, and to Jorge in particular. But Milo got the prospect that he would get to see a picture of Amira, which made him more happier about the prospect. At about late afternoon, the Biancatellos arrived at the Delaney's. Roger seemed to be sticking in despite his father's health. Denise made many appetizers, including cocktail meatballs and chicken and pineapple skewers. Margaret brought over a raspberry and pudding dessert. After dinner, Seamus showed Milo his old middle school yearbooks from the previous years, which had pictures of Amira in her 7th grade year and her 8th grade year. Milo remembered the first book Jimmy brought over to the summer camp 2 summers ago. There had been a haunting passage in Amira's 8th grade yearbook where the principal mentioned how it seemed like Amira's class had first started, walked through the doors of Pecan Meadow 3 years ago for the first time. This was the year Milo first noticed Amira at the fall festival. While looking at the books that evening, Milo had the song On Eagle's Wings stuck in his head. This hymn is a funeral hymn based on Psalm 91 and Isaiah 40, written by Michael John Cuss. This hymn was also sung at both Grandma Gladys's and Grandma Rosa's funeral, which I probably mentioned before. There was a vision in Seamus's room of a stone hand holding a mighty fortress where dwells this place of refuge for the sinners. There had come these red demonic police, shooting arrows at the fortress. There had been many dwelling outside the walls of the fortress, being hunted down by these demonic police over past mistakes. Then the fortress sent down angels to guard the hunted in all the ways to the fortress and bears them to their refuge. Then a mighty eagle flies over the mighty fortress, bringing the sun forth to shine and raising high those who take refuge. while the demonic police cannot bear the light. Then there's a sign of an engraving of Pope John Paul II, raising in his hand in blessing with an emblem saying, "Remember." After the Biancatellos came home from the Delaney's, Milo went over to the computer and listened to the song "You Are Mine," written by David Hoss and based on Isaiah 43. Milo was still slightly haunted by the phrase. It seemed like just yesterday that you walked through the doors of Pecan Meadows, found in Seamus's yearbook. Milo had also remembered his own graduation from 8th grade just 2 years ago, and how it seemed like he was going through high school. Milo could not help thinking that just a year earlier he had walked through the doors of the junior high school and now only had a few months left in this school. Then a new vision appears, with a figure resembling Isaiah showing up and saying, "Fear not, the Lord is with you," and holding a scroll with no seals, and revealing the history long forgotten and the school picture of a girl. There was a scene of this planned meeting by a cosmologist bringing a delivery to a lonely little boy and meeting in a gymnasium during the commemoration of a cosmic battle at Calvary. Then there was a scene of a creepy old man walking with a girl and a boy to the house of mourning, and the great victory won. Then there is a scene where an alien tricks 2 people into glamour. A red demon passes punishment, and their plans are soon brought to an end by a lion and a lamb high in the celestial realm. There's then a scene of Jesus calling his flock to hear his voice and ready for battle. Then the next scene involves Jesus performing exorcisms, casting out these tyrants of accusation, the fear-mongering superficiality and reductionism. Then Jesus is healing the blind, casting out the limitations and announcing himself as the light of the world. The scene then changes to Jesus setting the adulteress free from stoning, while the morality police stand on high, proud stand of judgment. Then Jesus heals the lame, freed from the bondage imposed by the nannying busybodies. The final scene, Jesus changes to Jesus confronting his disciples at the Last Supper, offering his peace not of the world, and promises the Holy Spirit, and to not be afraid before the great battle of mercy over vengeance. The next day, on Palm Sunday, Milo and Lydia were the altar servers. As with the Palm Sunday custom, at one Mass there is a processional that is begun outside the church in the hallways. At that point, the Gospel account of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem is read, and Monsignor Warner does a blessing. At St. Timothy's, the procession started in the church gathering space, and they entered into the church by way of the side entrance. Before entering the church, the choir sang the hymn, all glory, Lord and honor, while the organ had just stopped to play once the procession began. In church, there was a majestic vision of Jesus entering into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, ready to do battle against the minions of darkness. The company of angels were praising the Lord on high, while the Hebrews were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Then the Lord was exalted, and took on the role of a servant, and took on the cross, while those on earth, heaven and the netherworld bowed before him in adoration. As for the Mass, this ran pretty smooth. Monsignor Warner had not given the most clear instructions, which created some confusion. The offertory hymn was O Sacred Head Surrounded. The communion hymn was Were You There? And the ending hymn was What Wondrous Love Is This? Melendel's Triumph. Aeneas summoned Melendel, Alexander, Kashmir, Huzisha, and Dixividus to share the news. Aeneas read the visions and had some glorious news to proclaim. Then the Isaiah charism appeared with a new scroll. The jinns last heard from the charism that there were only 2 seals left. By this time, all the seals had fallen off, and it was time for the scroll to be revealed. The charism showed a history of a Milo in the mirror, and the inner workings that the dance had commanded of the elements Sister Wisdom and Brother Volition to fulfill. At this, the jinns present gave thanks unto the dance for great blessing unknown still to this day. Then Aeneas proclaimed that there was a great sun to come and burn the records of the Maludicos' accusations to mere ash. At this, Melendel had a gleam of triumph in his eyes. Then they all declared trust that the dance is always watches over in future days and great bounty and freedom from the power of the Rakshasajans. Then they gave honor to the elements, Mother Earth, for the time, Brother Volition, and Sister Wisdom. Then Dixividus declared this rousing speech. The dance has always been near, always one head a step of the Rakshasajans, and knew of their plans long before they planned the works of darkness. When the alien offspring brought forth the fall, this had turned into a path of eternal revelation. The Maludicos can never outwit the dance, for his benevolence is nothing to such great loving kindness, and works greater than all this, and his dancing works are greater than all the stars. Before the traitor who seeks to bring ruin, after hearing the word of the Archon, the dance made away. He sent Brother Volition to make a bridge built between the charges 2 worlds, and sent the leprechaun to the relatives for the great preparation. Before the curse of the prison of indoctrination could have their way, the dance turned the curse on its head as servants to the children. Spring break. That week, Milo became haunted by the yearbook picture of a mirror. Milo knew well that he would not see a mirror for another week, due to being on break. On Monday, Milo reverted back to playing a Wario Game Boy game that he had not played since 2 years ago over that spring break. This was the same game Milo brought before Palm Sunday in 8th grade. That morning, Emma came over to do some college work, as she would be leaving for Mexico with Aunt Diane and the O'Malleys on Wednesday early in the morning. That same day, Milo came across a hymn he downloaded known as Now Thank We All Our God, written by Lutheran pastor Martin Rinkhart. Martin Rinkhart had written the hymn in this day of distress after the slaughter of the 30-year war and the plagues that caused so much death. The hymn is loosely based on the apocryphal book of Sirach, which is only in the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles, but absent from Protestant and Jewish Bibles. When this anniversary of Duddlecip came, it seemed like nothing happened whatsoever. It was just another day, and the only thing Milo started thinking about now was the anniversary of when he met in the chorus years back before the 4th of July. On Tuesday, Milo came across another hymn downloaded known as You Are Near, written by St. Louis Jesuit Dan Schutt and based on Psalm 139. That night, Milo had living stations practice with his youth group. This year, Milo was upgraded to the role of Simon the Cyrenian instead of just being part of the crowd. Well, that was stupid. After practice, Ray and Milo went to see the movie National Treasures in theater. Milo did not remember too much about the movie as he dozed off quite early on. The ending of the movie reminded Milo of the movie Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. On the way home, Ray drove by Aunt Diane's house. Ray mentioned how just one day late tomorrow, she and the O'Malleys will be sitting on the resorts in Mexico. Milo was happy he was not going on the trip at this time, as he was constantly thinking about Amira and believed that anyone he saw in the country would remind him of her. Milo had never felt so strongly about a girl. After looking at a yearbook, Milo remembered how seeing the pictures of Katie and Minu in Salvatore's yearbook seemed like mere fantasies compared to the pictures of Amira. Milo never was sure he felt this strongly about the girl before. Milo felt overwhelmed with the whole thing on Wednesday, as he could not stop thinking about Amira. That morning before waking up, Milo had a weird dream about church, where some jolly Eucharistic minister gave Milo a second helping of communion and a big hug. Then the dream changed to Maryland Street. That afternoon, Milo and Lydia had gone out to lunch with Aunt Michelle and Gianni. Salvatore still had school that day, which is why he did not join them, as The St. James break started later. When Aunt Michelle brought the three back to her house, she found an answering message from her neighbors, explaining that they would be in Washington, D.C. over Easter weekend. Milo realized that Katie would be out of town over Easter weekend and that he would not see her in church over the holiday or get to set up this carol service. Then Katie stopped off over at Aunt Michelle's with some items to watch while they were out of town. That night, Milo got into another slight funk over this. Milo was slightly disappointed that night and found the only way he could humor himself was after Lydia got mad about someone eating the last fudge pop in the freezer. Margaret suggested to Lydia some alternative frozen treats, including a Weight Watchers treat. Margaret got mad and told Milo that it was not funny. On Thursday, Milo was out of his disappointment. Milo then considered that Amira and Minu both have another thing in common, that they both preoccupied his thoughts over his spring breaks, but on different years. More like, okay, whatever. Milo started to remember how his spring break in 4th grade went downhill after his day at Diddlekip. This all made sense to Milo now, thinking that he had been haunted by Amira. As for Minu, Milo had been preoccupied with her after seeing her on St. Patrick's Day 3 years ago, and the year after all these unresolved feelings bubbled up again when her and Nusha was out to service on Palm Sunday. Amira was now preoccupying Milo's thoughts this spring break again for the first. For dinner, Milo and Ray and Salvatore went to a Greek restaurant as Lydia was having a birthday party get-together with her friends. This restaurant, frankly, was nothing special, and Ray found he could make a better gyro himself. That night, Milo and Salvatore watched the 3rd Treehouse of Horror episode from The Simpsons. This was the episode where Homer forgets to buy Bart a present and buys Bart an evil Krusty doll from a Chinese shop. In another episode, Mr. Burns builds a Homer robot, and then Mr. Burns gets crushed and attaches his head to Homer. That night, Milo had a dream about seeing Amira at a grocery store, sitting at a lunch table, going through Seamus's yearbook, and a picture of the disappeared priest, Father Clausen. On Good Friday, the family went to church. That evening, Milo had living Stations of the Cross. As for Holy Saturday, this was pretty eventless. On Easter Sunday, the Biancatellos, Grandpa Tony, and Grandma Pearl went to the morning mass. This was the first Easter Milo had the choir in a long time, probably not since he was in 3rd grade. At church, Milo saw an old teacher he had not seen since he was in 4th grade. Both Milo and Ray shook hands with him after church. For gifts, Milo got the first season of The Simpsons, on DVD and a CD known as The Best of Monty Halligan, Edition 1. On the DVD, Reverend Lovejoy reminded Milo of the teacher he saw in church. As for the holiday, dinner was held at Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane's. The Kobolds' new task. The Kobolds had been back in Lionelum, but were not having any luck getting nearer to entering into the temple. Not long after returning back to Lionelum, the Kobolds had received news that they would have a new task in Atlantica. This third task was to retrieve a dangerous book and return it to the Great Phoenix. The Kobolds had not been thrilled about this prospect in the slightest. They had not had such great memories of Atlantica and felt the town was utterly chaotic and uncivilized. Not to mention, they knew that they would never have much time to visit Lionelum with this. The Kobolds were going through a box that the Great Phoenix had given them, reminiscing about the glorious days when they first saw the temple and the mountain pilgrimage. What the Kobolds did find was a second set of plans for a community center resembling the temple from the mountain view. This prospect had given them some hope for what seemed to be a bleak future. Soon the Kobolds were scheduled to head back to Londinium as the term with Lionelum was near completion. The Easter season. After Easter, things started to slow down quite quickly. On Wednesday, Milo ordered the CD Richard Prue, Music for the Liturgy, which had the community mass. That Wednesday night, word got out that Pope John Paul II needed a feeding tube. The Pope had been going downhill since February, after a long battle with Parkinson's and catching a nasty case of the flu that he was too frail to be able to handle. That same Wednesday, Ray left out an obituary that Roger's father had passed away. Lydia asked Ray if this was Seamus and Charlie's grandfather, which Ray confirmed was so. On Thursday night, Milo had art club and took the activity bus home. While walking home, Milo came across Aunt Michelle, who explained that the O'Malleys were over at Grand Petoni's. Aunt Michelle then took Milo over to Grand Petoni's for pizza and wings. The O'Malleys had returned from vacation in Mexico the night before, quite late, and this was an opportunity to have a late Easter dinner with them. Aunt Jane, Aunt Diane, Lydia, Eustace, Samantha, and Salvatore and Sylvester were all over. As for the dinner, this was quite fun, as they got a chance to talk about their vacations. Aunt Diane told about some guy in Mexico hitting on her, whose name was Paco, and another lady thinking she was Argentinian. Now keep in mind that Argentina has quite a large Italian population. Then on the way home, Aunt Michelle drove Milo home. On that Friday, word got out that the Pope was in serious condition and would most likely die. Milo first heard the announcement over the bus radio. This seemed a bit strange to Milo since he had never known another Pope in his life, considering that Pope John Paul II was the longest reigning Pope in many years. That night, the Biancatellos went to the funeral home, as Seamus's grandfather had passed away the day after Easter. On the way home, they thought about stopping at an Italian restaurant that they had eaten at around the same time that they had last been over at the Delaney's 2 summers ago. Milo had bowling that Saturday, and anticipating the CD coming, not to his luck. That day, while Milo was working on the computer, Pope John Paul II passed away, and Ray was watching a football game. The football game was interrupted with an emergency. Interrupted that said that the Pope had passed away. That evening, Milo downloaded the 16th horror episode, Treehouse of Horror, which had the perfect theme, Stranger theme. Plus, Milo downloaded some songs Near My God to Thee and Immaculate Mary in the Pope's honor. As for Mass the next day, Milo saw Minutia in church, but which had been a very cold day, and was dropped off by Roxana's family, as Minutia was staying with them for the weekend. The CD arrived on Tuesday, much to Milo's anticipation. Milo listened to the community mass and heard its Gloria for the first time, along with the recorded version of the Agnus Dei, also known as Lamb of God. That night, the Simpsons episode Excuse Me While I Miss the Sky was aired. This is the episode where Bart works for the Italian mafia in Springfield, and Lisa seeks to discover a star, which had the Gustav Holst Planets theme, from where our song I'm Bound to Leave My Country came from. By this time, Milo sensed that things were going downhill, and that his time with Amira may be running quite low. Plus all the glory of the new revolution seemed to be slowly dying away. Salvatore had some good news and told Milo about needing to sell tickets for a baseball fundraiser. Milo had planned on helping Salvatore sell the tickets for his baseball team, and they planned on selling them in Amira's neighborhood. A few weeks later, Milo returned to the ice show, as Aunt Michelle had tickets again. Frankly, Milo enjoyed the show, and he saw Todd, Cheryl, and Bill. Milo tried buying a snack from the food stand, and the guys working there were utterly clueless. Milo did not even bother when they could not even give him the correct prices. This show had run a charity fundraiser in which benefactors got a paper skate with their name. The skate donated was hung on the poster. At the end of the show, the poster got thrown away, and Milo took off a skate with Amira's name on it. There was a minor vision of triumph of the Easter story, where several woke in the early morning, lighting lamps with songs of salvation ringing, alleluias and cymbals of the highest sounding. Around this time, Milo had become quite fond of an Easter carol on his CD known as Rise Up in Early Morning, written by St. John of Damascus, and the refrain based on Psalm 150 and set to an old German carol. As for the rest of the school year, this was slow at best. Margaret went on another business trip to Florida, and Milo and Lydia returned to visit Aunt Marie and Uncle Matt for the weekend. They headed up one Friday night after Milo had piano lessons. For dinner they stopped at McDonald's. Milo was listening to his Marty Haugen CD and was on this hymn known as The Light of Christ, supposedly based on the Exultet, but used for Easter. The weekend was pretty bland as Aunt Marie caught a cold. During the afternoon, Uncle Matt took Milo and Matt to a guitar store. Matt tried getting Milo to buy a mandolin in honor of their Italian heritage. Matt thought that Grandpa Tony would be quite proud if he did get a mandolin and learn to play it. Now Milo had no clue how to even play stringed instruments to begin with, or he would have considered buying it. Milo had been more interested in the accordion, also maybe a little more Europeanly generic. That night, Uncle Matt took Ray, Milo, Lydia, Matt, and Lily to see this movie, Uncle Nino. This movie was about a man from Italy visiting long-lost family in America and bringing some old-world charm to the new current dysfunction. This movie showed Uncle Nino teaching his nieces and nephews how to build a garden, and almost tore up their family's front yard. And what else happened? Oh, Uncle Nino also almost ruined a business proposal for the Rob Michelli character. And then they of course learned the ways of not being so obsessed with careers and superficiality. Now Alicia declined and said she feared having a cold and running into someone she knew. After the movies, Uncle Matt took them for dinner at a restaurant known as Kelsey's. This restaurant was kind of like a Chili's, which had just closed a year before. The next day they went to church, with the priest who was clearly not doing too well. The opening hymn was Immaculate Mary. This priest did a rant on Britney Spears. Later in the afternoon, the Biancatellos decided that it was time to go and left New Seneca. Another weekend later, Amira went to her chorus class on a field trip to Chicago. Now Milo overheard the announcement that this was Roxana's birthday, and also knew that she was throwing her Sweet 16 party, Milo then realized that Amira would not be attending Roxana's birthday, despite being good friends. On a couple occasions that time, Milo had spotted Roxana sitting at Amira's table. Now, this trip to Chicago is what Amira had been raising money for. After Margaret came back, Milo downloaded this Spanish Renaissance carol known as Rio Rio Chio. There was then a dark vision of a wolf chasing a pregnant lamb. The lamb was given refuge on the other side of the bank, blocking the wolf. This rabid wolf had a box with some unknown object. Then there was a lamb with a crown and a scepter, whom the angelic choir sang, and the oppressed people had been waiting for. Milo found out from Salvatore that Uncle Ottavio had already sold the tickets at work. Milo was pretty annoyed about this, as to happen of all years. Now, Uncle Ottavio sold them because he did not think that Salvatore would even make the efforts to, as he never really did take much time to do so. Milo complained. Now, Ray and Margaret knew something about this already going on, and as they overheard Milo and Salvatore talking about this, one day when Milo was complaining, Margaret sensed that Milo was really displeased about something. Milo then reluctantly explained that he was going to help Salvatore sell tickets. Margaret, who knew why they wanted to sell tickets, told Milo to get over Minu. Milo did not take too well to this. Margaret had only known from what they overheard, and thought they had gone to sell tickets to meet girls, which she expected was all about Minu. But this had been only Margaret's conclusion. Margaret said that she knew Minu's feelings. Milo had feelings and would get hurt again with the Jafaris. Milo did not even bother to explain the real reason about Amira, as he was in a pretty pissed off mood about this. Eventually, the school year had come to its close, and it would be time for Milo to transition to the senior school. On the day before the school year let out, it had been evening, and Milo started to fear not seeing Amira next in the upcoming school year, as she would still be at the junior high school. Milo started having flashbacks of having left her for long periods of time, such as with Doodle Kip, both fall festivals. Milo then feared that he would have to do the same this year also. At the moment, the Hubataiji, known as the Kronos, appeared and dug its claws into the walls, causing them to bleed. Then at the hands of the Kronos, the clock started spinning forward, while some of the forces had planned on turning the clocks backwards. The Kronos is said to be the king of the clocks, whom only Father Time is the only creature who can scare him. Then another Rakshasian known as an Epitanitas appeared. These Rakshasians have come from the third order of Anogrammatrons, and were ones who loved status and accomplishment so much that they lost any other inner substance, and all that remained of them was hot air. These epitanitas are only able to take form through inflating objects such as balloons, sports balls, or pool floats. This epitanitas is known as Esmetar, whose only sense of identity is in chronological stereotypes. This time, Esmetar possessed a white balloon with black eyes and a mouth, resembling a ghost costume. Esmetar is said to prey on people 12 to 40. In fact, Esmetar is the one thought to promote the idea that breast size and body hairs are a determinant of masculine femininity. The next day, the school year ended. Milo never got to eat lunch at the same time as Mira due to not being a last day. They eat lunch at that time. During Milo's last day, they had a social studies final. For the most part, they watched movies. In Spanish, the teacher put on the movie National Treasure. During the movie, Milo vowed to see Amira over the summer, come hell or high water.